And we've kind of touched on this a little bit, but why is early intervention in therapy so important?
That's a good one. Yeah. So the sooner you can intervene, you can take advantage of those developmental periods where you're really primed to learn language and learn some of these adaptive skills that are critically important. There is a time, in life where children are just more likely to be able to learn those things quickly, languages especially in that early developmental period. So language and communication, you can do a lot, and you can learn a lot more quickly if you catch it during the right time. Another part is just opening up those learning opportunities. So typically developing individuals are learning all of their waking hours. But individuals on the spectrum, sometimes their learning has to be done very specifically. So you have to teach in a certain way. And what we do over time is we start with teaching to how they learn, and then we gradually expand it so that they can learn the way people teach, like in a traditional classroom, and how parents are naturally teaching. And we also teach the parents as well to kind of teach how the child is learning. But until that's happening, they're really only learning during those therapy times, and probably not at the rate of their peers. And so if they're learning at best 40 hours a week, they're falling further behind their peers rather than catching up. We need them to catch up and go further because they were already behind. And so the earlier you can do that, the sooner you do that, the more time you have and the less catching up you have to do, the less falling further behind that happens. So you can just make huge jumps and really change the learning trajectory. So if you learn to speak at 2 versus at 5, there's just a lot more, a lot further that you can go. Mm-hmm. And sometimes that's a difference between living independently and needing support for the rest of your life. So early intervention is really critical.
Does autism change and grow and maybe even improve with age?
It can, certainly. Yep. So individuals move on and off the spectrum all the time. And the reason for that is that there's not currently a biological test for autism. You can't get a blood test and be like, oh, you have autism. You don't. It's based on behavioral characteristics. So there are gold standards for diagnosis, and it's very reliable. Now, even after about 12 months, you can really get a reliable diagnosis. Often it's not done until 2.5, 3.5, but it can be done reliably. But it is based on characteristics that you observe. So you set up certain situations and you attempt to actually see the behaviors relevant to the diagnosis of autism. So are they displaying those deficits in social communication and interaction? Are they displaying restricted and repetitive behavior? Is it impacting their development? Are adaptive skills affected? Was this all present before age 3? All of those things. And so you see if they meet the criteria. After treatment, a lot of those things improve to a level that they no longer meet criteria. And so, you no longer would diagnose them with autism. But it is, a neurodevelopmental disorder. So it is something you expect to be persistent and be lifelong. But when it's diagnosed behaviorally like that, you really can move around on the spectrum. And some things improve with time and some things worsen with time. So hormones in development can affect symptoms. There can be times in your life where stereotypy, what some people call stimming, could be higher or lower. And it really depends, and it's different for each individual. So some things can get better with age, but some things can also worsen. And I've never seen anything worsen with treatment.
That's good to know. So Wedgwood's Autism Center for Child Development has some incredibly fun-looking spaces. It's like one of the funnest places we have here at Wedgwood. What does a typical day look like for a child at the center? Do they just get to play all day?
Kind of, but not exactly.
Okay.
So it is super fun. We are designed to be a fun and engaging play-based environment. Hopefully from the kids' eyes, they just feel like they're playing all day. But it is all very carefully crafted, and there's lots of programming, and our techs are very well trained in capturing, client motivation. And so if a child wants to play on the swings, great. They're going to let them play on the swings. And then after a little bit, they might, kind of playfully stop the swing, and they're holding, and they're like, oh, and the kid is kind of laughing. And then they might say, swing. And the client will say, swing, and then they'll let them go and they'll push them and the kid is laughing and laughing and laughing. And so they're really just capturing their motivation to do that. So they got them to say swing. You can get a kid to say swing 15 times in a few minutes, if they really want to keep swinging and they're having a blast. And maybe, you kind of hold onto the chains, and you stop them in midair. I do this with my kids and they love it. And then you're right at eye level. And so they're making eye contact with you and you're making these facial expressions and so are they. And you're really just doing that relationship thing back and forth, and it's really exciting and fun, and you're building that relationship and they're having a fantastic time and they're talking and they're making eye contact and they're making those facial expressions. So we really try to do it in a really fun way. So kids should be running to you. Most of our kids do. I had a parent tell me just this week because her child got out of the car and ran to his tech and they just ran inside and she was like, he's too busy to even say goodbye to me now when he comes here, and he's only been coming for about a month. And I'm like, yeah. He's like, bye, Mom, I have things to do. And he's having a great time. So, of course, we will work on teaching those skills. Remember, say bye to somebody when you leave them. Right. Bye, Mom, love you. But she was just really happy to see him happy to be there. So instead of kicking and screaming, going into a doctor's office type situation, kids are like, yeah, let's go. I know you have my favorite toys in there. Let's go get them.
Oh, that's so fun.
It really is. We play with toys all day long.
And you can't get a better work day than that, right? So how long are kids receiving ABA therapy at Wedgwood, and what does, quote, graduating from services look like?
Okay. So average length of stay is about 2 years. It really depends on when they start, how old they are, and just the variety of the deficits and the symptoms that you're seeing. And that is all individualized. So we look at treatment every 3 months and revise goals based on progress and family needs and everything. And so that's constantly changing, but on average, about 2 years of therapy. And graduation happens when they've met all their therapy goals. Again, they don't have to look like other kids. But we want them initiating social interactions at about the same rate as other kids, because otherwise we may give them all these great social skills. They may learn them and pick them up, but if they go to school and then nobody approaches them and they don't approach anybody else, then they still miss out on all those interactions. And so a lot of times we will have the child go to school and we'll go observe or have somebody observe. And kind of see, are they doing these things at the same kind of level as the other kids? Or is there anything that's kind of impeding their progress or their involvement or friendship making and things like that? And so that was an example that we actually had. Somebody just great, just blowing away all the assessments, met all the goals at age level for adaptive skills and talking and eye contact and gestures. All of that was great. And then we went to school and they're a little shy and didn't initiate interactions. And we saw that other kids were doing that, at a much higher rate. And so we intervened on that. We just did a little intervention to prompt her to say, hey, can I play? Or to just go up and play near people, or to say something related to what other kids were talking about. And then the next time we observed, she was doing that and she's in the friend group and, playing with the other kids. And so we really try to make sure that they're going to be successful. And a lot of times we start transitioning them to school before they stop therapy. So we might have them start going to school 2 days a week and therapy 3 days a week, and then switch to 3 days of school, 4 days of school. Or we could even do half days of therapy, half days of school, really depending on what the school wants and what the family wants. But that really helps to transition things and make sure that all of those skills and stuff that they've learned are staying where they should be and helping to integrate into their natural environment.
Really making sure they're set up for success. I love
definitely.
that. And with kids this young, especially the younger group that you work with mostly, I imagine family involvement is pretty important. So how do you and your team encourage involvement in treatment and support families?
So we do a ton of stuff with families. So of course they're dropping their kids off every day and picking them up. So we interact with the families every day. And so there's lots of time for asking questions and us answering those questions and things like that. But we also do monthly home visits and session observations. So either virtually or in person, they come into the center and watch a session where the tech is working with their child, and then the behavior analyst is answering the parent questions and kind of explaining what's going on. And then we'll do parent training sessions as well. So we'll start with usually a tech or the behavior analyst acting as the child, and have the parent do some of the interventions that we're doing with them, and we give them feedback, and then we have them work with their own child while we give feedback. And then we have them go home and do it while we observe virtually, or we come in the home and have them implement the things at home where we can kind of coach them through that. So, different things are going to happen at home, like the dog's going to run in or the sibling, and that's not happening in therapy. So we kind of coach them through handling that situation to help them transfer the skills that they're learning in therapy to the home environment. So we do that monthly now. And we've been able to do some really great stuff with telehealth during COVID that we were worried that was going to be a big barrier, but we've actually been able to get in homes and get parents doing parent sessions more frequently because of the virtual capabilities. And a lot of times when we go in homes, the child's behavior is very different. All of a sudden they're perfect little angels because, their therapists are there. That's something we call stimulus control. So we go in the homes and all of a sudden everything's great. There's no more problem behavior. They're doing everything that the parent asked them to do. And the parent's just like, okay, I swear this was a mess, last week. And we're like, yes, we know. And so something that telehealth has done has allowed us to go into the home virtually, and we can set up the computer so that we can see what's going on, and the client kind of forgets that we're there. We can even do it so where we have like the parent on the phone, like in an earbud or something, so that we can kind of coach the parent through their earpiece and the client can't hear us. And that's really important and really good because we need to see the behavior in order to coach the parent on how to respond to it. And so that's been really, really helpful, and families have really liked that.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
That is so cool that is an option. And I imagine for kids who struggle with change, this is how I behave in one location, This is how it is another. I'm sure that transition is hard, especially for parents.
So, definitely. And things have always been different at home. The rules have always been different. And so, why should I act like I do in therapy at home?
Yeah.
Well, so then we teach the parent, they're going to respond the same way that the therapists do. And then things get better, and that's awesome.
That is really awesome. So what is one thing about Wedgwood's Autism Center for Child Development that you think would surprise people?
I think probably the amount of noise and laughter that you hear on any given moment would be surprising. You visited and we've had conversations before in my office, and you're kind of like, and I just I didn't notice because it wasn't different. So we are having a lot of fun all the time.
Yeah.
There's bike riding in hallways, and that's okay. You can ride scooters in the hallways. You can blow bubbles inside. And all of that is because we care about motivation. If, having bubbles inside is what it's going to take to get you to say bubble or to talk, we're going to do that. That's okay. We have carpet cleaners. We'll clean it up. No big deal. So it's never boring. It's always fun. And something that might be surprising probably is just how much kids with autism are just kids.
So the Autism Center is a part of Wedgwood Christian Services, a Christian organization. So how do you see faith impact the work you and your team do every day?
That's a good one too. So I asked my team this a lot. And we ask people when they're applying, what would that mean to you, or what does that mean to you? And a lot of them, and I share this belief that you're working with people with shared values, and there's something really powerful in that. One thing we do that's different than other organizations is that we can pray for one another. We can pray for the clients and their families when they're having a hard time. A parent is in the hospital or having some other issues. We can pray over that. And I think it brings the team together. And it helps us focus and remember what's really important and why we're doing what we're doing. So even if there are, gripes about certain processes or time off requests that aren't honored or something like that, the big picture is always in front of us, which is the client and the family. And why we're doing what we're doing is to help them. And we see that measurably all the time. We see the impacts on their lives, and their lives are better. And being able to talk about that and pray about that, if that is your thing, is really meaningful.
I love that. So according to the CDC, 1 in 54 children is diagnosed with an autism spectrum disorder. So it's incredibly likely that we know families with children who have this diagnosis. What can we do to be supportive of these families?
So it's different for every family. I would say autism awareness and acceptance are a big thing. So reducing some of that parent guilt and that parent judgment, when you see somebody acting up, you don't know their story. They may be having a meltdown because, something is not right and they can't tell their parents why. Maybe there's a rock in their shoe and it's really uncomfortable, maybe even causing them to bleed, but they don't have the words to say that. And the parents just doing their best trying to figure it out. So I would say the less judging and the more compassion we can have, the better. But if you do know somebody who has a child with autism, don't pity them. Their kid is probably awesome. Mm-hmm. They probably have hard days, but they probably have really great days too. And they probably just want to be treated like everyone else. But any family with special needs, I think, needs a little extra sometimes. They need a place where they can say, hey, today was really hard and why. And so being a listening ear is great. And then offering to help, but not just in the, if you ever need anything, give me a call kind of way. That's not really help. But in the hey, could I take your kid to therapy on Monday mornings for you? Mm-hmm. Throughout the whole school year? That is something that is really helping. That's really tangible. Because that is a big thing. So families, a lot of them have to work, and then getting the kid to therapy and getting their other kids to maybe a different school, that's really tough. Mm-hmm. So transportation can be an issue. So if you can help with something like that, that would be really great. Or if you want to help learn the kids, some of the kids' protocols. So you could take them for a couple hours so the family can have a break, or they could go to their other kids, kindergarten open house or whatever, without having to take the whole family. Mm-hmm. That, is really meaningful too, probably for them. So, ask your friends what they need, and be willing to actually do something.
Right. That's great advice. I love that. So what's one piece of advice you would give to families of children with autism spectrum disorders? Or encouragement, advice or encouragement, maybe.
So, advice or encouragement for families of individuals with autism. Let me act as though we're talking about somebody with a child who's newly diagnosed with autism. So there are a few things that I think are really important for those people to know. And I always make sure to go over them whenever I do a diagnostic assessment or give feedback for a new diagnosis. And one is that they're still the same kid you know and love. Mm-hmm. A label doesn't change that. Right. The second thing is that there was nothing that you did as a parent that made the child have autism. Mm-hmm. And the third thing is that now that we know what it is and we have a label for it, we also have a plan. Yeah. There's hope. There's a process. We know what to do, and things can get better. Mm-hmm. So for the areas in which they're struggling, things will get better. And it's not going to take away, who they are and all of those great things that make them and who they are. But we can make things easier. We can work so that they can be more independent and have more access to things that they like. And that's what it's all about.
Yeah. I could see how that would give parents hope. That's great. Well, thank you so much for sharing your heart. It is so evident how deeply you care about the work you do, and you and your team are such a blessing to this organization and our community. I'm grateful to talk with you today.